What does it take to break a man who's already lost everything? On a frigid November night in Chicago, James Jimmy Callahan, a 58-year-old Army veteran, sat huddled against a brick wall in an alley off Clark Street. His breath fog in the air, his fingers clutching a thin blanket that barely kept the cold at bay. Once a proud soldier, now a ghost in the city's underbelly, Jimmy was invisible to most until the flashing lights of a patrol car pinned him in their glare. The officers, Detectives Malone and Carver, stepped out, their boots crunching on the frost-covered pavement. To them, Jimmy was just another vagrant, a nuisance cluttering their beat. "Get up, old man," Malone barked, his voice sharp as the wind. Jimmy, startled, tried to explain he was just resting, that he'd move along. But his words were cut off by Carver's grip yanking him to his feet, his blanket falling into a puddle. The officers didn't ask for his story, they didn't care. They saw a disheveled man with a scruffy beard and a faded green jacket, and that was enough. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists, biting into his skin. "You're loitering, resisting, and probably drunk," Carver sneered, though Jimmy hadn't touched alcohol in years. The arrest was swift, brutal, and unyielding, like the city itself. In the back of the squad car, Jimmy's mind raced. He'd been through worse desert storms, gunfire, the loss of brothers in arms, but this felt different. This was his own country, the one he'd fought for, treating him like garbage. His heart sank as they pulled into the precinct, the neon lights blurring through his tired eyes. He was processed like a common criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, a cell that smelled of piss and despair. The other inmates, a mix of petty thieves and drunks, barely glanced at him. To them, he was just another nobody. But Jimmy wasn't a nobody. Not always. 20 years ago, he'd been a decorated sergeant, a man who led his squad through hell and brought them home. A Purple Heart and a Bronze Star sat somewhere in a storage locker he couldn't afford to keep. After the war, the nightmares came, then the bottle, then the streets. Life had a way of unraveling heroes. As he sat on the cold bench, staring at the cracked concrete floor, he wondered if this was the end of his story, a forgotten man erased by a system that didn't care. The precinct buzzed with the usual chaos. Phones ringing, officers shouting, paperwork piling up. Malone and Carver tossed Jimmy's file onto a desk, already moving on to their next call. To them, it was just another night, another arrest. But then, a clerk at the desk, a young woman named Maria, noticed something odd. She'd been working the night shift for only a month, but she had a knack for details. Flipping through Jimmy's file, she saw a faded ID card tucked in his Walleta military ID. Her father had been a veteran, and something about Jimmy's weary eyes stuck with her. On a hunch, she picked up the phone and dialed a contact at the Veterans Affairs office, a friend who owed her a favor. That call changed everything. While Jimmy sat in his cell, Maria's friend pulled his records. James Callahan wasn't just any veteran, was a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, one of the military's highest honors, awarded for extraordinary heroism in combat. The records also showed he'd been flagged as a priority case for VA outreach, someone who'd slipped through the cracks of a broken system. Maria's heart raced as she read the details. Jimmy had saved his entire squad during an ambush in Iraq, dragging wounded men to safety under heavy fire. He'd been a hero, and now he was here, treated like trash. Maria didn't hesitate. She marched to the captain's office, records in hand, and demanded they take a second look. Captain Reynolds, a gruff man with a soft spot for underdogs, listened. His face darkened as he read the file. "Get those two idiots in here," he growled, referring to Malone and Carver. The officers, smug and unaware, sauntered in, expecting a routine debrief. Instead, they got an earful. Reynolds tore into them, his voice echoing through the precinct. You dragged a war hero through the mud without even checking who he was? You're a disgrace to the badge. The twist didn't end there. As the precinct scrambled to correct their mistake, a new figure emerged, a man named Tom Delaney, a retired colonel who'd served with Jimmy decades ago. Maria's call to the VA had reached him through a network of veteran advocates. Tom, now a lawyer working pro bono for homeless vets, arrived at the precinct within the hour, his presence commanding and fierce. He'd been searching for Jimmy for years, ever since he'd heard his old friend had fallen on hard times. Tom's eyes welled up when he saw Jimmy in the holding cell, a shadow of the soldier he'd once known. "Jimmy," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion, "why didn't you reach out?" Jimmy looked away, ashamed. "Didn't think anyone cared," he mumbled. Tom shook his head. "You saved my life once. Now it's my turn." With a few calls, Tom secured Jimmy's release, but he didn't stop there. He vowed to get Jimmy off the streets, into housing, and connected with the VA for the support he deserved. The precinct was a different place by morning. Malone and Carver faced disciplinary action, their arrogance replaced by shame. Maria, the clerk who'd made the call, became the unsung hero of the night, her intuition sparking a chain reaction. Jimmy, still dazed, walked out of the precinct with Tom at his side, the dawn breaking over the city. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. But the story wasn't just about one man's redemption. It was about a system that failed its heroes, about officers who judged too quickly, and about the power of one person's compassion to change a life. Jimmy's arrest wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a fight to reclaim his dignity. Tom enrolled him in a veteran reintegration program, and within weeks, Jimmy had a small apartment, a counselor, and a part-time job at a community center, sharing his story with others who'd lost their way. The alley off Clark Street stood empty now, Jimmy's cardboard shelter gone. But his story rippled through the city. Maria was promoted, her sharp eye earning her respect. Malone and Carver, humbled, took mandatory sensitivity training, their worldview forever altered. And Tom? He kept fighting, one veteran at a time, knowing the system was flawed, but believing in second chances. What does it take to break a man? Maybe nothing, if there's someone out there willing to make a call, to see beyond the surface, to fight for the forgotten. Jimmy Callahan wasn't just a homeless veteran, it was a reminder that heroes walk among us, even in the shadows. And sometimes, all it takes is one phone call to turn a life upside down in the best possible way.